We have all of our judges here, and now we're moving to the second part of our program, which is to hear from the judges their findings after hearing the testimony from our expert witnesses, and to really bring this together and have them comment upon what does this look like from the perspective of rights of nature actually being the form of law and form of governance that we have. And we're going to start with you, Carl Anthony, if you would please go ahead and respond and show us your findings. Thank you.
Having heard testimony regarding the land, air, and water pollution and the incidents of chemical accidents regarding the Chevron plant in... Shall I start over again? Having heard testimony regarding the land, air, and water pollution and the incidents of chemical incidents regarding the Chevron plant in Richmond, I find the company in violation of the principles of environmental justice and the rights of nature. And I recommend that the Bay Area Alliance call on the state legislature of California to begin hearings on the rights of nature legislation in California.
Hello, community relations. I, Courtney Cummings, tribunal judge, after hearing testimonies by our experts, do find that the refineries are in violation of Mother Earth and her rights. I find them guilty of believing that the animal life is unimportant and does not matter, and is therefore can be harmed, killed, and destructed by refineries and other like beings in order to make revenue off of animal and plant life. That is my findings. Thank you.
I wanted to highlight some of the testimony from Karina Gould, who spoke of what she saw as violations carried out by Chevron and other companies, and I thought it gave such a penetrating view of what is required once we recognize that nature has rights. What is required, and she said more than just this, but 2 points I wanted to emphasize. First was, we have to learn to listen. We have to learn to listen to the land and to the animals, to the plants, to all of the world, to listen. And she made the point too that as we listen, we don't always hear English. So it's to break out of our tight little capsule. And then when we begin with that nature has rights and needs to be listened to, then it becomes relatively easy to pass judgment on Mr. Conant's so-called client. Did Chevron ever listen to the land? Ever? Was there any attempt made whatsoever to hear the kind of wisdom that the land was offering? So it's easy to find Chevron guilty of not listening to the land, but we have to add in there the government of California Did it listen? Did the United States government, do any of the multinational corporations listen? Perhaps they do, but in many cases they don't, and in that they are in violation of the rights of nature. The other thing I wanted to emphasize that Karina said was this. It's related, of course, but it's slightly different. If we recognize the rights of nature, we have to ask. We have to ask before we get involved. So we can't simply force ourselves on others, but to ask, how can we become involved in a way that is mutually enhancing? And just the thought of Chevron asking the land, it's comical almost to the extreme. But among the other demands that I would like to make for Chevron and other companies would be this: that it would invest heavily in those endeavors that are attempting to listen to the other voices, the unheard voices, and so that we actually can learn how to ask the surrounding ecosystem. So if Chevron and other multinationals would join with those individuals who are trying so hard to listen to and learn what the wisdom is, I think together in working with the ideas of Fania Davis, of working together, we can find a way forward. So even though I find them guilty, I ask them to actually join us in the efforts to listen.
So I find the three requests that the prosecutor presented, I find in favor of all three of those requests, that Chevron and the fossil fuel industry, that their practices have and continue to violate rights of nature and human rights around the world. I find, and especially the testimony that Marco Evangelisti gave about the economic system and how the economic system operates around the world, I find that the legal and economic system that we're caught in and complicit with consistently violates human rights and rights of nature around the world. And I also find that the request that Chevron particularly and that the fossil fuel industry contribute to regeneration, use its funds in some manner to fund regeneration and cleanup of the damage that it's done, I find in favor of that. I want to say that one of the things that came up in the testimony that Marco gave was it was clear we can see how the economic system that we have actually supports a kind of activity in the world that continues to propagate rights of nature violations. So I would also recommend that what we do, at least in this country anyway, is that we get a price put on carbon emissions, and that be in the form of a tax or a dividend that's collected by the U.S. government and refunded to the people themselves, who are the owners of the commons that our carbon emissions are destroying. And a second recommendation I would make, dealing with the legal and governmental structures we have, I brought back to one of the comments that the defense representative made about how much of the power that his client has is because it's a person. And I would recommend that as a country and our government structures, we need to make it clear that rights, inalienable rights, are for living beings, for human beings and for nature, and are not for artificial entities. So we make it clear that corporations are not persons and don't have inalienable rights under our Constitution. So those would be two additional recommendations I would make.
The prosecutor had asked us to look at the three issues, and like you, I agree. Richmond refinery, in the case that we have discussed today, but also the fossil fuel industry, I find it guilty. That the context of legal and economic system in which these violations occur, we find the economic and legal system guilty. And it's time to deal with how these violations will be rectified. But also, as the chair of the tribunal, I wanted to take a moment to say something. I'm just struck by the fact that we're sitting here talking about rights of nature. Think of it, rights of nature, nature, Mother Earth that we all depend on for our very own survival. Today we are talking about her rights. The mess that we have created, that we have to talk about her rights. That we have to come to the defense of Mother Earth, to which our future, our present, everything is interlinked. We talk about her rights. So I'm struck by that. Having said that, I also feel I still can't get out of my head what was presented in the testimony by Shannon Biggs. We have a legal system, but that does not mean that it delivers justice. It's very obvious that our legal system today has come to be controlled by the corporations, by this misconstrued concept of growth, GDP, development, all of those. So within that, definitely, within the United States, there's an urgent need for money out of politics. And we would say that going forward, not to have money out of politics would mean that we do not have the democracy the way the founding fathers intended United States to be, to have true democracy. So if we are going to have true democracy, corporations would need to be out of it. And when we talk about rights, human rights, when we talk about rights of nature, nobody can hand them over to us, definitely not the corporations. The whole concept of the legal concept of human rights, when you look at that, it is about having policies that ensure that these rights are protected, that they're respected, and if everything fails, then they're fulfilled. Now, within that context, we cannot expect corporations to deliver on those rights. That means our governments have to deliver on those rights, and that means governments have to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. And there is no place for corporations in a legal system then, and in our governments. So from ideas that were put out by Carl in terms of right here within California, what needs to happen to have hearings and to have the California legislature enshrine rights of nature in our laws is absolutely important if you're going to have democracy. And then we're talking about a company and fossil fuel industry which is multinational. We have heard today about the assaults on rights of communities living in Richmond, but we cannot forget, as Jeff Conant pointed out, that the crude oil is coming from Nigeria, from Russia, from Canada, where indigenous peoples, where local communities are facing death, arrest, intimidation of the worst kind. Any kind of restorative justice will not be complete if it is not multinational or international in its scope as Chevron is.